Jenny's shift was working the night shift at City General Hospital. She normally worked straight days, but this Saturday night she was covering for Amy Hoskins, whose son had gotten married that day. She and her husband, Gary, had attended the wedding supper, then left so she could rest for an hour before starting her shift. Midnight, and all of the patients were resting quietly. She sat at the ward desk talking to Sheila Perkins. Sheila was telling her how her husband had been unfaithful to her. She told Jenny about how she solved it. She said she now had him wearing women's panties 24/7, and on Saturdays he was dressed in a dress and did the housework. She said it would be a long time before he strayed again, if ever. Jenny thought about Gary and how he would look in a dress. Then she dismissed it as a quirky thought. By the end of her shift she was very tired. It had been some time since she had worked the night shift. She arrived at home and found Gary up and dressed eating breakfast. She told him she was going to lie down and sleep and to get her up no later than 1 o'clock. She asked him what he had planned for the day. He told her he was going to trim the dead branches off the tree in the backyard. She told him to be careful, and he reminded her he had trimmed that tree 2 years ago with no trouble. She was in bed sleeping when she heard her name being called through the open window. She looked at the bedside clock and saw it was a little after 11. She heard Gary's voice calling her again and got up to see what the matter was. She looked out the back window and saw him lying on the ground under the tree. She slipped a robe on and headed out to where he was. When she got out there, he told her a branch had fallen different than he thought and knocked him off the ladder. He told her his leg hurt something awful. She felt his leg and told him she would have to take him to the emergency room to get checked out. It took her 10 minutes to get him into the car and for her to get dressed. To him it seemed like an eternity. 10 minutes later she had him in the emergency room and they were taking him for an X-ray. He was returned to the emergency room and a Dr. McCormick introduced himself to him and told him his leg was broken, but that he was lucky as the break had aligned itself well, so he wouldn't need surgery to set it. Dr. McCormick started to put a cast on his leg. By now the morphine shot they'd given him when he arrived had kicked in fully, so he didn't feel much pain when his leg was moved. They left the emergency room with Gary wearing the hospital gown, since they couldn't get his trousers on over the cast and he didn't want them to cut off one leg of his pants. They would have had to cut off so much that he would probably have been arrested for indecent exposure if he had worn them. When they got home, all he wanted to do was rest. Jenny knew it was the morphine doing its thing on him. He fell asleep on the couch with his leg resting on a dining room chair. An hour later he woke up. Jenny fixed him a sandwich and a glass of milk. He told her he never saw the branch kick back. He said it hit him in the chest and knocked him off the ladder. She told him she had put his saw and ladder back in the garage. That night he slept better than he thought he would. The next morning he put on his robe and went for breakfast with Jenny before she had to go to work. He complained about his hips hurting and Jenny explained that with the walking cast his left leg was higher than his right, that was why his hips hurt. She told him to sit as much as possible and take it easy. She told him that if she thought of anything to help him get back to normal, as much as possible under the circumstances, she'd be sure to let him know. She left for work and he grabbed his crutches and headed for his studio to go to work. He was a painter. He examined the 2 pictures he was currently working on and decided to try the one that was almost done. First he tried to paint sitting in a chair, but it wasn't working out, so he stood and managed to get some work done that way. His robe sleeves were in the way, but he kept going forward. By noon he was exhausted and went for some lunch and rest. He ate lunch and laid down for a much-needed nap. 2 hours later he woke up and went back to his studio. He continued working on the same painting, but now his robe sleeves kept getting in the way. He tried tucking them up, but that didn't work. Finally he shed it and it solved the problem. He was close to the end of this painting and stood back to appraise it. He looked at his trademark flowers in the picture and was happy with what he'd done. He stepped forward and with a new enthusiasm headed for the finishing strokes. When he had it finished, he was satisfied with it. He knew it would bring a good price at his broker's art gallery. Lately his paintings were bringing a lot more money than he had ever thought they would. Jenny arrived home a little later than usual, carrying some packages in with her. She took the packages to their bedroom and went to his studio. "Hi there. How goes it?" "Well, it could be better. That damn robe was more bother than help. My hips hurt from standing, but otherwise I finished another picture. I tried sitting to paint, but that didn't cut it, so I am now standing in order to paint. I think I can solve your problem, but you have to trust me. I have been thinking about you all day and I think I know what you need. Right now I'll try anything that might help." She had him follow her to the bedroom. There she had him stripped to his jockey shorts. Then she glued some breast forms on his chest. He wondered about them but didn't say anything. Then she helped him get into a rather plain blue shift that zipped up the front. She went into the closet and came out with one shoe, a black 2.5-inch heel pump, and helped him get it on his good foot. He never thought about the fact that there was a difference in their shoe size. He stood up and moved on his crutches. "This does feel better, but why the breast forms? They make the dress fit better, so you don't have that dead area in front." He accepted that and went to see how his handling of a paintbrush worked. She changed into jeans and a blouse and started supper. At supper he told her how well everything went. He was excited that he could do his painting without the distractions that had bothered him that day. He asked what made her think of the shoe. "Well, I know a walking cast is thick on the bottom and figured a heel on the other foot would straighten your hips so they wouldn't get so sore. You know how when you stretch a muscle that isn't used to being stretched, you are going to feel it." He ate supper feeling lucky that he had such a smart wife. She ate with a smile on her face because she had gotten him into a dress and it was so easy. The next morning he was dressed in the same outfit and his painting was going like old times. He hummed as he worked. He was working on the part of the painting he always enjoyed, putting the flowers in. All of his paintings had flowers in them somewhere. He was an authority on wildflowers. About 9:30 the phone rang. It was his art broker, the owner of the art gallery. He said he had a lady there who wanted her portrait done. Was he interested? He had done 3 other portraits and they turned out great, so he agreed. The broker told him she would be there about 1 o'clock this afternoon. He went back to his painting and worked until lunch. He watched the noon news as he ate. Then he went to relax before his afternoon stint. He was startled when the doorbell rang, having completely forgotten about the lady coming to have her portrait done. He opened the door and saw a 40-ish lady standing there. She introduced herself as Lydia Stonehaven. She told him she was impressed by his paintings and wanted him to do her portrait as a gift to her husband for their 25th wedding anniversary. He invited her in and led her to his studio, got a fresh canvas, and started painting her. She was an easy subject to paint. He noticed that her makeup was impeccable and that she had fine facial features, and knew he could do an excellent job on her portrait. "How long have you been wearing dresses?" "Oh, today is the first time. My robe always got in the way and my wife came up with this so I could paint. I broke my leg Sunday and my pants won't go up over the cast. I never wore a dress before, but now it allows me to keep working with ease." "I see. You look very nice in that dress." "It doesn't bother me. I always figured artists were from a different cut and just wondered if you were also." He decided to turn the conversation and asked, "What do you do to pass the time?" "Oh, I have a very successful business. I graduated from cosmetology school and now make house calls to do up people who can't make it to a beauty parlor or that want that special personal touch. I do a very good business, and today I have to be at a client's house at 4, so I have to leave around 3:30. "Not a problem. What time can you come tomorrow?" "I figure it will take approximately 12 to 14 hours to finish your portrait. Tomorrow I can come at 10 in the morning and stay until 1:30 if that is all right with you. Thursday I can come at 1 and stay until 5, and Friday I have all day off. I like my 3-day weekends." "That sounds perfect with me. I always put a flower in my paintings. Is there a favorite flower you'd like for me to put somewhere in your portrait?" "I've always been partial to red roses." "That'll be perfect. I know just how to do it." By 3:30 he was well on the way with her portrait. It was going a lot better than he expected. She left and he returned to the mountain landscape he'd been working on before she arrived. He was humming to himself as he painted. Jenny arrived home and stuck her head in to see how he was coming. She heard him humming and knew he was in a good mood. At supper he told her about Lydia and her portrait. She congratulated him on the extra surprise doing a portrait and not having to pay a commission on the sale of it. He told her he didn't know what to charge, as it had been at least 3 years since he had done a portrait, and the last one was of Sue Havers, who was a close friend of theirs. He'd given her a special price for that one. Jenny told him about her day at work, and about one special patient recovering from a heart attack, how well he was doing. She told him how surprised she was when a patient does well when you're least expecting it. He thanked her for her help in getting him so he could paint in comfort. She just smiled. He never suspected she'd wanted to see how he would look in a dress. She thought he looked pretty good, if she had to say so herself. The next morning she had him put on a black straight dress with a white sailor collar that was trimmed with lace. She also had him put on a black thigh-high nylon so the heel would feel better. He was working when the doorbell rang. Lydia complimented him on how nice he looked. He blushed, and soon they were working on her portrait. She sat and talked to him as he worked. They had a pleasant conversation and were becoming friends. By 1:30 he was over half done with the portrait, and was at a point where he could do more without her sitting there. She left, and he added to the portrait a single red rose, held in her hand. He was extremely happy with how it was going. That evening he was enthusiastic as he told Jenny how well the portrait was coming along. She caught his enthusiasm and they had a very nice conversation. The next day Jenny dressed him in a floral house dress with a full skirt. She liked how nice he looked in it, and was very happy as she left for work. When Lydia arrived she complimented him on how nice he looked in the dress. He thought he looked like a man in a dress, but accepted the compliment. She sat as he worked on the portrait, smiling her special smile. He captured it perfectly. "You know," she said, "you look so nice from the neck down. It's too bad you don't do something from the neck up. You know, use some lipstick or something, and do something with your hair. I think I could do wonders with you if you would let me give it a try." "I don't know about that," he replied. They were near the end of the day's session, so he steered the conversation around to something else, saying, "Tomorrow I should be done with the finishing touches in about an hour. Then it has to dry for at least an hour, and you can take it home with you." She was really happy to hear that. When it was time for her to leave he escorted her to the door and she left him with a parting comment about doing his face. He told her he would consider it, and she smiled. That night he told Jenny what Lydia had said about doing his face. Jenny told him it wouldn't hurt to see how he would look. Secretly it was more than she could ever hope for. She didn't know why she felt this way and she didn't care. The next day Jenny dressed him in a red knit dress that had roses embroidered on the upper front. When Lydia arrived, he was surprised to see her carrying 2 suitcases. She set them down in the dining area and headed for his studio. As he was putting the final touches on her portrait, she said, "You know, I am an artist of sorts also, only I work mainly with faces and beauty products. I will do you as a thank you for your work on my portrait. On the house. I've always wanted to see if I could make a man look good with makeup on." He finished the final work and told her it would take an hour to an hour and a half for it to dry thoroughly. She said that was perfect, and now he should let her do her thing. She didn't give him a chance to agree or disagree. She had him bend over the kitchen sink as she shampooed his hair. It was on the long side, and she said it was almost perfect for what she had in mind. She started doing some clipping. It didn't take long before she was putting some curlers in his hair. She covered his hair with a bonnet when she was done and started a small dryer she had in her case to dry his hair. Then she told him he would feel a twang when she started to pluck his eyebrows. He yelped on the first one but was quiet after that. Soon she was done with that and started to work on his eyes. She added false eyelashes, eyeliner, and eyeshadow, explaining how he was to do it himself after this. Then she worked on his cheeks, then his lips. Then it was time for the bonnet to come off and she worked on his hair. When she was done, she held up a large hand mirror so he could see how he looked. He was amazed at how different he looked. He told her he probably wouldn't win a beauty contest, but he wouldn't come in last either. He kept looking in the mirror as she put the rest of her stuff away. He couldn't believe that was him in the mirror. He finally handed her the mirror and thanked her profusely. Then came the moment for her to see her portrait. They went into his studio and he allowed her to see it. Her jaw dropped as she looked at it. "Am I really that good looking? It is beautiful. You did a superb job. It is excellent. I am afraid to ask how much it is going to cost me. I was going to charge you $300 for it, but you can have it for $250. It was a pleasure to work with you. You make a great model. I am going to pay you the $300. It is worth every penny of it. I love the red rose I am holding. It looks real." He wrapped her picture and she took it to her car before she got her supplies from the dining area. She then gave him the cosmetics she'd used and a big hug before she left. It was too late to really get going on another picture, so he went into the bathroom to look at the full effect of the changes she'd made in his appearance. As he looked in the mirror, he thought there was someone he could fall in love with. Then he worried what Jenny would think. Jenny arrived home and was surprised not to see Gary in his studio. She headed for the bedroom to change, and as she passed the bathroom door she caught a glimpse of Gary. She stopped dead in her tracks. "My God, is that you?" He turned toward her and answered that it was. He worried that she would be angry with the change in him. "Oh, I love it. You look so nice." She went to him and gave him a kiss. He felt a big sense of relief. At supper she said that he was doing so well and looked so great that they could go out again for their usual Saturday night buffet, the one they'd been going to ever since they were married. She poured compliments on every aspect of his transformation. She told him how glad she was that now he wouldn't be cooped up in the house. He wasn't as confident as she was about going out, but didn't say anything. He was thankful that she accepted what had been done. Saturday morning she went on her usual shopping trip. She usually got groceries and whatever else she thought they might need. He worked in his studio and was happy over the turn of events. He still didn't know about going out to eat that night though. Jenny came home and put all of her purchases away. She went into his studio and chatted with him for a short while, then went to make a light lunch for the two of them. At lunch she told him how glad she was that they were going out for supper. He wasn't sure it was a good idea, but he was game for anything. He wondered if he could wear his sport coat and a pair of sweatpants. Jenny told him not to worry about a thing. She said she had everything figured out. At 4 o'clock she told him to do his makeup and brush his hair. He wasn't sure this was a good idea, but she talked him into it. As she wished, he did his makeup and then brushed his hair. When he was done, Jenny told him she was going to help him dress. First she pulled a pair of lace-trimmed panties up his leg and over the cast. He told her he still wasn't sure about this, but she would have no part of it. Then she fastened a bra on him, telling him that it would make the breast forms look more natural. Then she dropped a slip over his head. Then a powder blue and black brocade dress over his shoulders. Then she slipped a black thigh high up his good leg and slipped a powder blue heel on his foot. It'll be nice when you can wear both shoes instead of just the one. Do you think I am going to keep on wearing dresses after the cast is off? Why not? You look good in a dress. Look in the mirror and tell me that you don't see a lovely woman there. I am not going to argue with you. That is 8 weeks away from now. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. They left, and when they arrived at the supper club he was a bit anxious, but when the hostess asked if there were just the two ladies tonight he felt better. The hostess seated them at a corner table to simplify his having to deal with the leg cast. They ordered a pre-dinner drink and waited for it to be delivered. Before it was delivered, 2 young men came over and offered to buy them a drink and pay for dinner. Jenny told them that both of them were very happily married and they left. Their drinks arrived and Jenny made a toast to both of them. They clinked glasses and drank slowly. They ordered the buffet, and when it was time to go through the line, Gary got a busboy to handle his tray. Back at the table they enjoyed the great food and engaged in animated conversation. No one seemed to notice that Gary was a man in a dress. They finished their dessert, and nothing unusual had happened. In the car on the way home, Gary commented on how he'd been afraid someone would recognize him. Jenny laughed and told him that no one had seen that pretty woman before, so how were they going to recognize him? Then he asked where she had kept the dress he was wearing, inasmuch as he had never seen it before. She told him she had picked it up today just for him. She said she knew he would look great in it. When they got home, there was a message on their answering machine. It was Lydia Stonehaven telling him that she was sending 3 other women to him who wanted their portraits painted. She said people were always commenting on the portrait he had done of her. Sunday morning at breakfast he said, "Jen, I like what's happening and I even like how I look. I can never thank you for all you have done for me. Marrying you was the best thing that has ever happened to me. I really, really love you." Jenny replied, "I think marrying you is the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't know what I would do if you weren't there for me. You treat me like a queen and I will never be able to repay you for all you have done for me." Their emotions were running full blast, and they both knew there was nothing in the future that would break them up. Dear reader, you can decide for yourself if he continued to wear dresses after the cast came off.